good evening and a very warm welcome to everyone here. We are here with Rijul Rajan, who has just cracked NLU Jodhpur. And please introduce yourself.
My name is Rijul Rajan and I secured an All India rank of 306 in the Common Law Admission Test this year, and I secured an All India rank of 132 in the All India Law Entrance Test, which is for NLU Delhi.
Right. Many congratulations, Rijul.
Thank you.
We are very happy and we are congratulating you on behalf of the whole team of Hitbullseye. You've done greatly this year. Now, in today's session, we are going to talk about Rijul's journey. We'll also be talking about some tips, some secrets from Rijul's side, which he'd like to share with all of you now preparing and going into the same journey. So let us quickly begin on this aspect. Right. Rijul, what was your basic strategy when we come into your preparation?
Ma'am, for preparation, I think the most important thing is to do something every day. Every day should be productive. And I started my day with reading the newspaper, doing the GK and vocabulary, and then going through the resources given by Hitbullseye. And I made sure that I gave plenty of sectional tests and mocks. And I think most important thing is doing something daily, because I think if you take a break, you get out of the habit of things. And the most important thing is that you are comfortable with your preparation. It should not be stressful for you.
Right. Talking about stress, what would you think can these students do when it comes to, tackling stress, tackling pressure? Because one of the major concerns when we talk about students or when we talk to students at this point of time is how do we manage stress? We have class 12 going on, we have, school, we have to manage our friend circle, we have to manage, our family, our life as a whole. So what would you suggest to these students today that they can do for managing their pressure and stress?
Ma'am, I think I would have suggested talking to parents and friends, but I think most of the pressure comes from there only. So I think playing sports or doing your hobbies, for some it is drawing or painting, or for me it is playing video games, reading comics, and spending time with myself and with my family. So I think this is a very subjective approach, but you should do whatever you are comfortable with. I think most of the people know what they like, and they should just chill off from the preparation for some time and then get back to it.
Right. So the point that comes out from here is wherever the pressure gets slightly too much, that is the point where you should eventually take a break. Because that is, one very important perspective for everyone. Because when you come back from that break, it really helps you from there on. Right. Moving ahead, let's talk about how was the paper this year.
I think the paper was, as many would say, it was lengthy, and the GK section was very surprising to say the least. I think the legal section was fairly simple compared to what we had expected. We were expecting contracts or torts or something, but I think most of it was from the Constitution, and it was heavily influenced by the current affairs, I would say. As for the math section, I think this year there were no mistakes in the paper, as I think 2020 and 2021 had 5 or 6 mistakes in the math section. I think the reading comprehension part was a bit lengthy, but the logical reasoning passages were fairly shorter. So I think they compensated for each other. As for legal and GK combined, I think you could have compensated for the loss in GK with scoring well in legal, because it was simpler.
Right. Now, when I talk about legal as a whole, what were the focus points? Now, this year, we had expected some questions from contract, torts dominantly. However, this year saw a substantial shift. We saw a lot of passages from Constitution, family law, and you say that it is influenced by the current affairs. So, would you say that it was somewhere an unexpected approach?
Ma'am, not unexpected. I think when you are studying legal, the first thing that you do is the Constitution. You will eventually do the family law also, but I think these were fairly simple topics and these were the basics. So if you're going to do contracts and torts at some point, you have to have a strong foundation. So I think the Constitution, if you have studied well, the legal section wouldn't have been too difficult for someone. And even if someone had not prepared much for legal, I think if you gave the passages a good reading, you could have a fairly idea of how to answer the subsequent question.
Right. Moving ahead towards the GK section, you have told us right now that GK was, a slant, or, it was unexpected. It was somewhere, the most difficult or the tricky section in this year's paper. Now, why did you feel so?
I just think that there would have been so many better topics. I can give examples like 75 years of independence, the Quad meetings, Nordic Summit, 25 years of BIMSTEC. I think there were many other topics. Olympics, which would have been a much expected topic, but I think we got topics from 2019. One was from April 2021. One was from June 2021. So the three topics are straight away out of the technical 1 year gap we take between exams. So I think not many would have prepared for it. I think civil aviation drone rules one was from June, but I think if you are prepared for it, you could have answered it simply. Other questions you should have straight away left if you didn't know the answer.
So you are saying that leading of the questions was a better choice in this year's exam. Was that true?
Yes, if you can make an educated guess while looking at the question, if you can eliminate, let's say, one or two options, then you can go for, let's say, just take a leap of faith. But in GK, if you can't eliminate even a single option, just without thinking anything, leave that question. Move ahead.
Right. So this year, I believe that we had a better choice in leaving the questions rather than guessing. Is that appropriate? Yes. So guessing was not the best option this time. Where you were not sure of the questions, I guess leaving was the best approach for this. Now, another question that seems to come up from a lot of questions, and what I'm getting from the students also over here is that what about the passage reading? Now, there's always been a conflict whether we need to really read the passage when it comes to legal, or should we really not read it? Should we leave it? Similarly, in GK, should we give enough time, or should we even give time at all to the reading of the passage? Should we spend time on that, or should we completely skip it? What was your experience in the paper?
For GK, I personally did not read the passage. I straight away went to the questions. But I think if you think that you can read the passage in a short amount of time, and if the paper does not seem lengthy to you, then you can give it the passage a try if you cannot relate to the questions. As for the legal, even though I was fairly prepared for the legal section, I did go through the passages so that I can just refresh the topic and I can easily answer the next 5 questions in a shorter amount of time, because I wouldn't have to think much if I've gone through the passage once, rather than recalling everything.
Right. So passage reading, again, now as per this, obviously is a must for some sections, but not for all of them. You could easily skip the passage in the GK, but when we talk about law or legal section, passage reading will be a must. Now, I'd also like to tell everyone over here that we are open to any sort of doubts, questions all you students do have at this point of time. We'll be taking them up and we'll be answering those, and we'll be putting them forward to Rijul here so that he can give his opinion on your questions here as well. Now, moving ahead, you also are talking about how the paper was lengthy. This is something that we have known since the 2020 paper, 2020-21. The trend is that the CLAT examination will be a lengthy paper. You have 2 hours and there are 150 questions in this exam. Now, understanding this, we were aware of this. Now, where or at what strategy did you apply to develop that perspective that you are going to be attempting a lengthy paper? And what were you exactly doing for tackling this perspective?
Let's first talk about the paper. I think either you are spending too much time reading the passage, or you are spending too much time reading and analyzing the question. So if you are spending too much time reading the passage, I think the best way to improve that is reading the newspaper and going to the editorials and trying to break them down. Do the basics when you're reading the editorial, like drawing the central theme, inferences, assumptions, conclusions, whatever. And then if you are reading the editorials daily, I think one problem that many students face would be the reading speed and then comprehension. So I think the best approach is to start reading slowly and then get to a pace which you are at where you are comfortable, and it is also fairly fast so that you can go through the passage easily and understand it in one go. As for spending too much time on the options, well, I would say that as we talked about earlier, leaving the questions. If you are spending too much time on the options, then you should just leave the question. And if you have time at the end of the paper, then you should come back to it. And developing a reading habit, I think most people have a issue in, let's say, I can't read a book. I think then you should take up a topic that you are very interested in. I think if you can't develop a habit of reading, maybe you are reading something that is not suited to you specifically. So editorials are mostly general knowledge, and they are mostly from topics that you might take an interest in. For example, many people, although they would believe the contrary, I think many people are interested in politics, and there are fairly a large amount of editorials that come out on politics. And as you just start reading them, you will see that if you are reading something that interests you, you will read that passage fairly easily and faster than a passage that is that you are unfamiliar with. An example would be that in CLAT and ALIT, I think this year both exams had one passage from psychology each. So I think if you are not familiar with psychology, then it would have taken you a lot of time reading the passage. If not, then you would have gone through it fairly simply.
So now when we are talking about the lengthy paper, definitely lengthy paper is going to be there. So how do we prepare for it? Rijul tells us that it's the best thing to do in this regard is to develop a reading habit. Reading habit has to be coming, it has to come to you naturally. It has to come on a daily basis. Every day you have to be reading constantly. And when we come into reading perspectives, what you have to understand is here you have to pick up things that interest you. Now, obviously, we have a mix of, where a person is really good in sciences, however, he may not be that great, when we are talking about psychology or sociology or things like that. So, to pick up things that interest you, that help you in, reading, to develop a reading is what you have to understand and pick up. Now, when we talk about this perspective on, we're reading and we're reading various sources, let's understand, if I'm talking about each section, what were you reading for each of these sections beyond the newspaper? So, okay, first let us talk about which newspaper were you reading and referring to. Obviously, there may be a time that you're referring to another paper and then you switch to a separate one, or then we'll like to talk about what were you reading beyond these newspapers. So first, let's understand which newspapers were you referring to while you were preparing.
Well, I was only referring to one newspaper, The Hindu, but if I had to suggest a newspaper today, I think I would rather recommend the Indian Express. I think The Hindu grows a bit monotonous after some time, and the editorials also, I think I personally started getting a bit bored. I could read the headline and I could say that yes, this topic would say so, and this editorial wants to convey this message or something like that. But from what I heard from my teachers also and from my friends also, they said the explained section of the Indian Express is quite fairly easier to understand, and it is very informative also from the exam point of view. Otherwise, I think both of them are really good newspapers. It doesn't matter which one you take up. I think what matters is, are you reading that carefully or not?
Okay, when we are talking about newspapers again, now you are recommending two newspapers, absolutely. But for a student who's probably never, been reading any newspapers, he's coming in fresh and he knows, and he's just gotten to know, acha, ab jaake newspaper padna shuru karna hai. So what would be, now, would you tell them to directly go on to the Hindu or the Indian Express, or would you tell them to start at a different newspaper which can serve as a good base, and then he can develop his reading beyond that and then move to Hindu? What would be your approach?
I'd say that if the person is quite comfortable with the language, then you can straight away pick up the Hindu or the Indian Express, and over time you will get used to it. If you're not that comfortable with the English language, then you can start with the Tribune or the Hindustan Times, and then after you have, let's say, 3 to 4 months of, you have the habit of reading, you have developed a fairly better reading speed than before, then you can pick up the Hindu or the Indian Express.
Okay. Now coming to that perspective, so we know that we can pick up we can build one step and we can go ahead. So understanding that, now, were you reading from any other source beyond your newspapers? I mean, obviously, because, not every newspaper is going to have every element of, your paper there. So what were you reading that, helped you a lot also beyond the newspaper?
Beyond the newspaper, if I am to talk sectional wise, I think
Let's talk one section wise. Okay,
Yes.
if I was to talk about the verbal section.
I think the editorials are great for improving reading speed and comprehension, as I said, and it also improves your vocabulary a lot. I think I can't stress enough how much they improve your vocabulary, because all of a sudden you are hit with words that you have never heard in your life before. And as for the GK section, I think the newspaper is not necessarily the only source for GK. I think you should rather rely on your institutional resources and maybe few reputed, I would say, sites. And then for the legal section, I think even if you have not prepared anything for the legal section, I think legal studies is an subject in class 11 and 12. Even if you have not taken the subject, the NCERT PDF is available online for free. Just give it a read through. It is very simple to understand. I would personally recommend it for a person who has not touched the subject ever. And as for I think a newspaper serves three purposes: basically reading speed, comprehension, giving you a habit of reading, and I think it also instills a discipline in students that this is something that they have to do every day, because as they say that if you take a break from a newspaper one day, the next day you will not know what happened, because there is a certain flow, and when you just drop reading the newspaper, it suddenly feels like you have entered a whole new world.
Okay. So starting is the critical point. So to start or to take the first step is obviously the most difficult thing to do. The same applies when you're reading a newspaper. The first newspaper that you're probably going to read, you'll probably spend about 5 hours or something on it. But as you keep moving ahead, you'll understand how you are addicted to the flow of the news that is coming to you every single day. Now, let us understand, how much time did you really spend on reading the newspaper every day?
At the start of my preparation, I think 1.5 to 1 hour 45 minutes. And at the end of my preparation, I was very choosy in what I wanted to read. If it was a very political, or I'd say a topic that did not interest me, I straight away left it. And I used to spend only 45 minutes reading the editorials, and then only the topics that interested me. For example, the Russia-Ukraine part, I was really interested in that whole skirmish, and I've been keeping up with it till now.
Okay. Beyond the newspapers, do you think that there are any books that the students should refer to, some novels by some authors that they can, pick up when they are reading? Any books or novels that you'd like to recommend to the students today?
I think, like as I said, it depends on the level of comfort the students have with the language, and also any topic that they might be interested in.
Anything that you were reading during this time period that, sort of influenced you, motivated you at that point of time?
My English teacher at Hitbullseye, I think Rajiv sir,
Yes.
he recommended reading the Sunday supplementaries, because they include a lot of different topics, and whether it be literature, art, culture. And he said that you don't need to read a newspaper every day. If you have to develop a habit of reading different topics, just read the Sunday supplementary ones of different newspapers, and you will be good to go.
Okay, great. Right. So, we have talked about the various sections. We've talked about how your paper went. And, now I want to know, when you're sitting in that exam room, there's that critical 1 hour before you're starting, right? And that critical 1 hour, there are a lot of thoughts that are going on in your mind. Obviously, it's a difficult point of time, because everyone is facing, they're obviously feeling nervous. They now need to know, some things. But they have to maintain their cool and calm, because they are now going to write the paper. This is the final moment. anything that you could suggest about, or firstly, I'd like to talk about what was your experience, what were you thinking, what was happening in that 1 hour, because everyone knows that you have to enter the examination hall about 1 hour to 45 minutes early. What was going on? What was going on in your mind? How did you keep yourself calm and prepared for the paper?
I think I definitely did not keep myself calm and prepared for the paper. I was one of the very first students to enter the examination hall, maybe the fourth or the fifth, and unfortunately, I was in the front row at the the seat that was closest to the door, so I could see every student coming in, and the examination hall was slowly filling up. And also adjacent to my room, construction activity was going on, so there were a lot of drilling noises, and so obviously there was a lot of distraction. And as every student kept on walking in, the pressure kept on building up. And I think the only way I maintained my calm was remembering some jokes, or just running a song through my head, or just trying to close my eyes and take deep breaths. And I think at some point you do succumb to the pressure. I think even today, I think I could have done better in the examination maybe if I had not taken that pressure. But I think that can be solved by giving mocks and getting comfortable with those 2 hours. And what's done is done, I think. I say so.
Right.
The moment you are in the examination hall, you just need to have confidence in yourself, because of course you cannot prepare any more after entering the hall. So you should just have faith in yourself and your abilities, and that's it.
Okay, so now we have a few of the questions coming in from the students. One question is regarding, okay, now I'll ask this. Firstly, you were an offline student, but you had preferred online classes during your preparation. Okay, now how did you feel during that, or how would you feel that probably, or what would you recommend to the students today to go in for the online prep, or is it a preferable approach to go for the offline?
My personal opinion is that everyone should go for an offline class. I was in an online class most of the times, but I think it was mostly because I used to be preparing side by side. Like the moment the class ends or starts, I was already preparing between that time. And I think the advantage of a offline session is that it is fairly more interactive than what an online session could be. Like if you have a doubt, you can have it addressed and you can have it resolved within a matter of seconds. Whereas in an online class, you have to kind of wait for the teacher to check the chat, and by the time your doubt gets resolved, maybe you have already moved on to the next topic. So the only reason I opted for an online class was because I wanted to save on that transport time, and just sitting at home and preparing in a single sitting. I used to sit for hours on end. I think that was easier for me. But if you cannot do that, if you don't have a, let's say, tendency to sit for long hours, then I would suggest that you go for an online session, or sorry, offline session, and interact with your teachers. It also boosts your morale a lot.
Right. So there is a balanced approach here. Sometimes, it's now an individual approach. For some, online classes have benefited. On the other end, for some, offline have also benefited. So there is a balanced approach here. We cannot clearly come out with one specific thing at this point of time. Now, I have another question that has come up from another student is, how did you manage pressure of both boards and your exam? This is something that every student asks us all the time. Ma'am, boards hai, साथ के साथ हमने ये prepare करना है CLAT का. How are we going to manage? And this year we saw that the CLAT was immediately after your boards. They did not even give you a gap. So how did you do it, and how did you manage?
Well, I would say that this is a situation that you don't have a control over, and as for it, you can only make strategies to tackle it better. For boards, I think boards are fairly easier than competitive exams. Boards are not competitive exams, so you don't have to score better than everyone else around you. There's a different kind of pressure around boards. For boards, I would say that just pay attention to what your teacher is teaching in your school. Go home, revise it once, and just before the exam, go through your basics. And if you're confident enough, you will definitely make it. Don't lose heart. As for the the clashing of the timings, I was one of the unfortunate ones. I had an exam on 14th. I had an exam on 15th as well. So 13th, 14th, 15th were 3 days that I was completely involved and out of my CLAT preparation. Uh, as I said, this is not a situation that is under your control. The only thing that you can do is be comfortable with giving both the exams. Boards are, as most would suggest, fairly easier than competitive exams like CLAT. And I would say that in a situation like this, where you have your board exams and your CLAT exams slightly adjacent to each other, just I would say give up on spending most of your time on board preparation. Prepare for CLAT, and let's say 2 days. Let's say 2 days later you have an exam. Today you can spend time on preparing for CLAT, and you can spend 1 or 2 hours preparing for the board exam. And the next day you can spend 1 or 2 hours preparing for CLAT, and the rest of the day preparing for the board exam.
Okay. So now coming to the next point, I think what we or a lot of the students will want to know is how many hours did you give for CLAT preparation in a day?
Well, it depended on different phases of my preparation. I started in April. I was till October. The only thing that I was doing was going through the resources online from Hitbullseye and reading the newspaper daily. That's it. After October, I pumped up my GK preparation, and April onwards, I think the bulk of my preparation was done in April, because April was a month that I had no school, no practicals also. I think only one practical. What I did was, I think I spent around 7 to 8 hours preparing in April. Otherwise, I think it was 3 to 4 hours daily. That's it.
So
But April was April was the time where I took most of the pressure.
right. So I think what we can get out of this answer here is that you start early, but when you are starting early, you have to be continuously dedicated to your goal. Right, so every day you're putting in some hours regularly. So that does not have to be 10 hours in the beginning itself or 8 hours in the beginning itself. In the beginning, even if you're giving 2 to 3 hours on a daily preparation, just going through concepts, revising everything, I think that will really, really help you, because here you have to maintain a habit of going through things. Moving ahead, when you're in the core months right before the paper, so the last 6 months and ideally last 3 months, you will have a different strategy. So what was your last 6 month strategy?
Last 6 month strategy was keeping up with the GK. I think that is the most important thing. You should not take a break from GK around that time. I think if you had taken the CLAT 2020 and CLAT 2021 pattern, most of the passages were from the last 6 months. Of course, that was false in this year, but I think the last 6 months are very, very crucial, because I think at that time also, after preparing GK for so long, you start developing an interest in the current affairs for the other topics like logical reasoning, reading comprehension, and legal and maths. I would say the most important thing is to maintain discipline and consistency, and of course you have to give time to it. You have to put in effort, but the most important thing is to give sectional tests, practice a lot of questions, give your mocks, spend time analyzing them, focus on your strengths and also focus on your weaknesses. And I think if you are earnest in your efforts, you will definitely make it through.
Right. Coming to mocks now. So if I was to talk about your mock exams, mock tests, how frequently were you giving these tests? If I was talking about, your various stages of preparation, starting from, 6 months, let's talk about the period before that, then moving to 6 months, and then to the last 3 months. So what was your frequency of mocks in the first stage where, you were there and you knew you had sufficient time, you were comfortable in that zone? So how many mocks were you giving?
I think this is one area where I lacked a bit in my preparation, because I did not give a lot of mocks. Actually, I think in the first 6 months, I gave only sectional tests for critical reasoning and reading comprehension. I practiced those skills fairly earlier, and I only built upon them later. For the last 6 months, I was focusing on GK, and I think I gave my first mock around the 14th of May or 13th of May, and I think I gave around 11 to 12 mocks. But I would say that an aspirant should give around 30 mocks. I think I gave 2 less. When you give so many mocks, you get used to the paper. You get comfortable with those 2 hours of intense reading, analyzing, and once you get used to that pressure, giving mocks helps you get comfortable with the paper. That's all I'm saying. And once you're comfortable with that paper, I think giving the exam would be like eating lunch, I would say.
So what was the zone? We have multiple ways where people give their mock tests. What was the zone and what was in your mind when you were deciding to actually give these mock papers? Now there are multiple things that go on in multiple students' minds. One thing is that how do you give a mock really? Because I think students are like, chalo, we'll give it or we'll not give it. We'll think about it. That is the first thing you have to tackle. Then the next stage is they sit down, but they don't really start. So how did you really actually get to it? And then how did you manage and during that 2 hours? Now I hope you sat down for 2 hours at a stretch. Then how did you manage that?
Well, like I said that an aspirant should give 30 mocks. Well, 30 is a big number, of course, because you need to get a habit of giving mocks also. So, of course, you will make a few mistakes in your first mocks. You will not be as serious in giving the mock. And I think I spent 2 hours at most. And the environment in which I was giving a mock was fairly conducive. I sometimes switched off the AC, sometimes did not have a fan in my, had the fan switched off. One thing that I always did was I told no one to enter my room. There was absolute silence when I was giving the mock. But I think the aspirant should get used to different situations because, as I said, when I was giving the actual paper, there was construction activity happening outside the room. So that, of course, was a bit of a hindrance. So I think, of course, you can't be perfectly prepared for the examination. A mock gives you at least some level of preparation that these kind of hindrances don't bother you much while you're giving the actual paper. The most important thing for a mock is not that you score well in your mocks. I think the mocks are meant for analyzing your weaknesses, improving upon them, and basically getting used to the paper, how it will be, how actually you will have to read for 2 hours on end. You will have to analyze. It will be 2 hours of intense intellectual activity. And if you are not used to it, then I think without giving a mock, if you are straight away sitting for the CLAT, it would be a very surprising situation for you.
Right. So it's really important to give these mocks, important to get into the zone of giving that paper and be used to all sorts of environments. So at one point of time, you can even tell some people to make some noise around you, I guess. Right. So I think, mocks are important. And you also came up with one thing in this, answer that was, it's not important to score too well in these mocks. What's important is to get used to that environment. What was your score in the very first mock paper that you did?
I don't remember my score in the very first mock, but overall I have seen scores of 70. I have seen scores of 108 and 104.
So in the beginning, were you right away at 104 or even at 70 if I was to say?
No, I think it also depended a bit on my let's say mood
Preparation or strategy?
Strategy preparation, but also like sometimes I used to give a mock just for the sake of it.
Okay.
So I think if you're not genuinely giving a mock, then don't give a mock. I think that's one mistake I did make. But if you're talking about marks, I have seen scores of 70 in the ranges of 80s, the 90s, and also hundreds 5 or 6 times. But as I said, I think it is a tool for improving upon your previous mistakes and only propelling yourself towards the peak.
So what was your lowest score?
70.5.
70.5, nothing in 60s maybe?
No, never in the 60s.
All right. So you had been practicing a lot of sectional-based tests. You've been practicing a lot of chapter-based tests. So general questions kept on going on. Now, once that mock is complete, what after that? What were you doing after the mock was complete?
Straight away after the mock, I used to analyze it because I think that I might forget what the passages were conveying. And if I think I had to analyze it later on, then I would have to read the question paper once more, and I think that would take a lot more time. If I analyze it straight away, I would immediately know, all right, I did make this mistake, and I could have done this better, could have done that better. And I think it is much more efficient to analyze the mock later, but mostly you can go for a break of 15 minutes and then come back and analyze the paper.
Right. So I have another question here that has come from a student. That is, if I start now for the 23 paper that is in December this year, do you think, or could you, probably give her some tips for the same? Like, firstly, she's a little hesitant at this point of time, so she's asking us whether she would be able to crack the paper. Secondly, what would be your tips for her?
Well, asking whether you can crack the paper in 5 months or less. Well, the blunt answer would be that there are people who decide to give the exam 1 month before the exam. So sometimes even they can crack it. So it's not a matter of the months or the time you're giving. It matters the quality of your preparation. So 5 months is a lot of time. You can definitely give the exam and score well. I think I would recommend that the first 3 months go through your basics, refine your skills, and the last 2 months focus on your mocks. You will definitely improve well, keep up with the GK. And if you are still thinking if I should start preparing, then I think the best time to start preparing is right now. You should not lose time before you start regretting that I should have started preparing long ago.
So start right away, start as soon as possible, be dedicated from the first day, ensure you give attention to all of the sections equally, and now try to go through as much current affairs, go through, your concepts in detail. This is the best way to start. So also not to, forget, obviously newspapers are playing an important role. Now, no matter what, newspapers, this becomes the most critical thing for us for building speed, for now also, developing the reading habit and so on. Another question that I'm getting from Prem here, he's asking us, or he's asking Rijul here, how much time did you spend on your co-curricular social activities, your Instagrams, Facebook, and things like that, and beyond that, other activities, anything beyond your studies? What did you do to cool off?
I did not spend much time on social activities, but I do spend a lot of time on reading, let's say, comics or some other things beside than my preparation material. And I still play a lot of video games.
Can you suggest any for our students here?
Well, I think GTA is a fan favorite.
Okay.
And you have other games. We have God of War, etc., etc. So it can be anything. Like many students like to play PUBG or something. It's up to you actually. For me, I think I did spend a lot of time on my co-curriculars. The most important thing is to keep your peace of mind and not be in a rush to prepare yourself for the exam. I think you should take a gentle and slow approach, but the quality of your approach and your preparation should be very fine.
Right. So we have some games that have been recommended by Rijul for all the students that are currently preparing. But it's also essential that when you are doing these, you have to understand that you are taking these up only to cool off your mind from the preparation. You cannot put these things in the front runner, and so you have to understand that perspective also. And obviously Instagram, Facebook is the best. This is the best time to stay away from these. Obviously, simply because they will at this point of time hinder your preparation. Our main focus is to prepare for the exam and to put all our emphasis on studying at this point of time. No one is asking you to put in 12 hours right in the beginning, but you can start as of today itself. Now, moving ahead. Okay. Another question is, would self-study alone help me, clear the examination?
Let's say you have not joined any institute. Well, there are certain books available. I do not remember which ones, but I think you can find a video online which does recommend fairly high quality books, I would say, that you can use for your preparation. And you can use reputable sites. Like I personally visited Drishti IS when I had to let's say, prepare for one topic. So Bullseye gives you a weekly issue of topics, and then let's say I was more curious to know about that topic, then I would go to Drishti IS, or maybe read newspaper editorial or look out for anything regarding that topic. As for reading comprehension and logical reasoning, I think there is a book by Wren and Martin also. For vocabulary, there is Word Power Made Easy, which is the book that I used. And for maths, I think for maths, I personally don't remember. I was fortunate enough to join Bullseye or any institute. If you have joined, then you can use those resources. What matters is not just doing the topics. What matters is practicing them again and again and revising them, doing questions. That's it.
Okay, another question that's coming from a student again here is, when we talk about law or legal studies, legal reasoning here, would you say that it is important for us to remember all the articles of the Constitution or all the sections of all the laws that we prepare at this point of time? Is it important to remember everything word by word in respect of articles, sections, and so on?
Frankly, no. You don't even need to remember the bare language of the acts or the fundamental rights, for example. I think the consortium website itself states in the syllabus that they are given that you do not require any prior knowledge of law, so as to say. But if you, it is recommended that you prepare for the legal reasoning section, and I think, as I said, just use your institute resources, and if not, the NCERT PDF for class 11 and 12 legal studies is available online. They cover all the topics of constitution, family law, international law, criminal law, torts, etc. They will help you brush up your basics, and then just keep on doing questions. And I think questions help the most in the legal reasoning section, because they throw certain new situations every time.
Right. So in the legal section, there is also that, opinion of everyone that though the passage may be easy, when it comes to the questions, the answer choosing is very, very tricky because they are very closely linked options. Was that true for your paper?
For some passages, I would say yes, for 3 to 4 passages. But as I said, this is where doing the questions again and again will help you. I think one of my teachers told me that there are some bare acts, for example, the criminal law and the criminal law and the law of Indian Contract Act, where along with the bare act, they have given certain illustrations for the sections. So most of the questions they see come from those illustrations themselves. I did not read them, but I did practice a lot of questions, and my legal studies school teacher, so they helped me a lot in understanding the basics, and they personally always gave certain examples and illustrations when they were explaining a topic to us. And one thing that I personally believe in while giving the legal reasoning section is that I just stay confined to the passage and what is given in the passage. I didn't go out of the scope of the passage or what previous knowledge I might have about that topic. As for options that are very close, I think, as I said, if you are not able to decipher the correct answer in 10 seconds, leave it. But if you think that there is a black and white difference between both the options, then go for the one that you think is better.
Right. So that is your best approach that we can use for our questions and in relation of legal reasoning part. Right. Last thing what comes to my mind was this year the papers, the quant section in the papers, so the DI section. I had heard from multiple students myself that this section was much easier as compared to the previous years, and however there were some problems where because of the length of the paper, some students had avoided this section. Was that true for you also?
Yes, actually, I think I reached the math section when 10 minutes were left, and I only did 4 questions, which I was sure that I would be able to do. I did them in 3 to 4 minutes, and then I moved back to the previous questions that I had left, and then I did those questions. And by the time I did those questions, the time was up. But I heard from my peers and I heard from other teachers as well that there was no mistake in the math section. The the section was fairly easier. They said that you could have done it in 10 to 15 minutes if you have a comfort with maths as a subject, which most of the students don't have.
Right now, so that was the next question, and one of our students has asked again. That is, I am weak in maths. Will I be able to really get through this paper or not? Because my maths is horrible. So, what would you say now?
Well, for an examination where, let's say, I was not prepared for maths at all, so that automatically means that I'm preparing for a paper of 135 marks. And let's say, as in this year, the GK section, let's say you couldn't answer 16 questions, you couldn't answer the 3 passages. You are now looking at a paper of, I think, 119 marks. So that has drastically lowered down your capacity to attempt questions and also to score better. So I think maths is a section that you can clearly get the answer from one way or another. And to one question, there is only one answer. You cannot have tricky options in maths, I think. So if you practice enough, if you are giving that enough time, I think it will certainly be fruitful in the exam. It can compensate for a loss in another section, I would say. Let's say, as in this year, GK was not well for many students. I think if someone who had prepared for maths really well, they could have made up for their loss in the marks in GK. Let's say I couldn't answer 16 questions in GK, that means I lost 16 marks. But if I could answer 8 questions in maths, overall I could only not answer 8 questions.
Right. So, somewhere a balanced approach is going to help you. You should prepare for all the sections. Try to go through the basic kind of questions that come in the exam. And do not absolutely leave maths just because you're slightly weaker in maths. Because we've all done maths up till class 10. So, it's not going to be very difficult or out of the world. But you should prepare for every section equally. Now, finishing off, NLU Jodhpur, one of the top 5 NLUs of India with great placement opportunities at the end. How are you feeling? Are you excited? What is going on in your mind for this journey?
I am very excited for it, but it's not just excitement. I look forward to going to the university and learning a lot of, a lot that there is to know about the legal world. But most importantly, I feel like I need to work even harder in the university. As I said, after I gave the exam, I was a bit, I would say, I think I could have done better. And for a time, I was contemplating that I should give the exam again and get to an even better university. But now I think that it is not worth the time, effort, and money to do that when I've already gotten admission in a very, very good university. I think there is a lesson learned in that, and I think at this point, what is important is staying humble and staying grounded. And yes, I just look forward to working hard at the university, and most importantly, I'm looking forward to the hostel life.
Yes. Is this the first hostel?
Yes, that is right.
That's great. So we here at Hitbullseye wish you a very, very best of luck. Congratulations, and we hope for the best for you in the coming life that you have chosen.
Thank you.
Thank you.